Welcome back, everyone. Glad to have you with us today as we continue on this endeavor, discovering more about human development and the pieces that are put in place that lead to an individual having a life of triumph, amazing accomplishments, a feeling of love, appreciation, and gratitude, or a person having the complete opposite kind of experience, whether it's misery, shame, development of chronic illness, and a lifetime of poverty. These all come into play by the roots that are planted within their earliest experiences in life. This is the Subconscious Healer. I'm Dr. Gabe Roberts, and today we'll continue talking about these stages of human development. Let's put it this way: all the damage or all the good is done to the person between the ages of conception and around 4 years old, sometimes five. Um, but in my work, when I work with clients and they have chronic problems and manifestation of autoimmune conditions and sometimes much worse, or even mystery type illnesses where an arm just gets paralyzed and they have a rash that just nothing responds to. They have chronic pain in a certain area that just, and they've been to quite literally 20 different chiropractors and physical therapists, and nothing has helped, nothing has worked, nothing has given permanent resolution. It is something that is deeper. It's something that when we ask their subconscious mind, the only source that knows to take us to the key event of what is happening here, what the seed planting is, we go back to some memory between conception or around 4 to 5 years old. And that's 99% of the time. There are exceptions, of course. Sometimes it's when a person was 12. I had a patient last weekend that we went to a spot that was actually kind of recent. It was whenever she actually broke her wrist. And this was a particular beach that she enjoyed spending time on. And she broke her wrist a few weeks ago. And we went to that spot. Her mind took us there. There was something about that piece that had to get resolved. And when we started looking at the underlying pieces of this, suddenly it went through a lifetime of experiences, dealt with her father not being able to stand her own ground, not being able to speak up the way she wanted to. Her father would always step in and make decisions for her. And of course, this has other implications. There's some thyroid challenges and other things, repressed anger, things like that. But they all are dealing with the self-development that occurred between, her early childhood experiences. Now, we can start to see how the human mind develops. We enter this world very naive and absolutely holding no perceptions on anything that is relevant of mankind. Then, with each passing moment in the womb, and like I said, a majority of my clients regress to something in the womb. I've regressed people back to moments right after conception when looking for their seed planting of what would be manifested as panic attacks, severe anxiety, things like that. We go to moments right after conception. And then each passing moment after conception, a tremendous amount of data flows into the developing nervous system through the senses. Even though the senses are not fully developed, they're still accumulating data. And the data starts to organize itself into perceptions. Okay. The best way to think about this is like a cluster of grapes building. So, our conscious mind, the part we think rationally and analyze things with, and the part we are, as a society, we are trained in this monophasic way of thinking to where we're always in higher state brain waves, beta waves, which is what you would um, be in if you were driving in a really bad thunderstorm and you had to pay attention to the road and you have both hands on the wheel. It would also be the brain state if you're in a very important lecture if you're taking college courses or something like that, a medical board exam or the bar exam for an attorney, and the instructor is telling you, no, this will be on the test. Make sure you write this down. You go into a high alert beta wave where you're focused and you are absorbing that information the best you can, um, into your conscious mind. But that's not where you're going to have any kind of creative thought, because you're purely in the conscious mind then. And that's for the most part how our society operates. If you're going to access higher levels of thinking, getting into where you start to spill over into the subconscious mind, you're going to need to go into alpha states. And it's real easy to do that. Just relaxed states, having your eyes kind of tilt up at the horizon about 25 degrees and slowing your breath down. Those are all kind of very simple ways to get into a more relaxed state to where you're opening the door between the conscious and subconscious mind. But uh, when you are between the ages of conception to around 5, you're in the deepest brainwave state, which would be theta. Theta and delta, of course, is for deep sleep. So, but theta is when you are just accumulating every little piece of data that comes in, absorbing it like a almost like a hard drive, a computer hard drive that is blank but has an endless capacity to store information. These experiences start to accumulate and form like clusters of grapes on every subject, every experience, every um, every kind of topic imaginable, and they accumulate um, into like a cluster of grapes, and each individual grape is a particular perception on one individual topic. And what happens is, as this starts to build up on subjects, topics, ideas, we start to get these cluster of grapes building that becomes the foundation of our most powerful goal achieving agency known to humanity, our subconscious, that can't reject any one of these ideas. These perceptions fall into place one at a time, almost like grapes forming on a vine. And over time, around the age of 4 to 5, it eventually starts to build up in our minds a complete picture of what our life is for us. That picture, now held within the powerful goal achieving mind and protected by a critical faculty, will be manifested with ruthless efficiency. That's why the very first thing I said on today's podcast was a person could have this kind of life, or a person could have the other kind of life, the opposite coin, sometimes maybe in between there. But the reason why is because of those early perceptions that get built and are protected by a critical faculty. The critical faculty turns on like a mirror when anything comes into their experience after that cluster of grapes is completely formed. Anything that comes into their experience, a suggestion from the outside world, a new topic, a new idea, something that is not in vibrational resonance with that subject, that topic, that idea, that perception. It's like a mirror flips on and it's reflected right out. Now, if I were to tell you the grass is blue and you tried to believe that for a moment, you notice there's a part of your mind that slams shut, like a mirror turns on and it reflects that perception back. Even if you tried desperately to believe the grass was blue, that critical faculty turns on like a mirror, reflecting out anything not in harmony with the perception that you already have made, that indeed the grass is green. Now, when I say the grass is green, that mirror reflection turns off, the new data is absorbed, and you have this deep inner sense of calm, of security. Suddenly, whenever I say the grass is green, whether you're aware of it or not, there's a deep sense of security, because I just added more to a perception that you already have, that you already believe. I've made one of your grapes a little bit bigger, a little heavier. That grape in particular is built on a perception of the color of grass. Well, that's how it works with every one of our perceptions. We have good or bad. So it is during this time when this grape cluster is getting formed, that's when we learn we are truly products of our environment, not our genetic makeup, our environment. And there's more than enough evidence to show uh, that our early environment really sets the stage for how we are going to live the rest of our life. This is also the reason that mom and dad tend to get blamed for all the dysfunction we have as adults. And it's not because mom and dad were bad parents necessarily, but it's that mom and dad make up the most part of our person's early environment. The earliest experiences at all, the earliest experiences we have are the ones that make up our life and are the most significant, influential, and most important. And most of those times are with mom and dad. One of the things that I like to say is during this moment when we are absorbing all this data, when that subconscious cluster of grapes is getting formed, we have a definite necessity, other than, of course, breathing air, drinking breast milk, um, and, getting sleep and being, obviously sheltered and warm. We have another uh, necessity, and that is to be welcomed, to be accepted for who we are, to be loved. When I say the word love, I mean only seeing the best parts of you, period. Okay. Accepting you for who you are, just as you are, perfect in every way, without any kind of, um, without any kind of deviation from that. We all have a need to be loved and welcomed in this world. That need is not met just because your parents loved you. Your parents can love you, but that doesn't mean that you're getting that need met. And that is global. That's global across the everyone, not just our nation, not just our neighborhood, not just your family. That itself is a form of trauma. We don't get our needs met. And a large part of that is because our society has completely globalized itself into a system that does not recognize the necessity for human needs. We just don't. We operate from the beta. We don't operate from the deeper alpha, which is more heart centered kind of thinking as well. We operate from the brain. And when you want to see what a society looks like that, excuse me, that operates from the lying, rational brain, just look at our society today. We try to think things through, make them logical decisions and all of that. And guess what? It just turns into, a representation of what we have going on. So when we look at human development again at a different angle, let's put it like this. All the damage is good. I'm sorry, all the damage or good is complete between the ages of conception and around 5 years old, not birth, but conception. And by the age of 4 to 5, children hear enough repetitious labeling as to who they are, what they're worth from their parents' point of view, completely from their parents' point of view, to totally saturate their subconscious mind, to form that cluster of grapes, if you will, with a quote, parent painted image of self. At this point, the self image has officially been formed and solidified. Now, if worth was mostly installed in these key years, if self worth, self recognition, accepting for who they are, was installed in these key critical moments, then the critical faculty that acts like a mirror protecting any perception not like it, the critical faculty will form to protect that feeling of worth. And from there on out, good things are compounded. The more things happen in life that are in resonance with worth, it gets added and built and reinforced. And any kind of negativity in life is rejected. Any kind of negativity that comes in outside of worth is reflected out with that mirror, with the mirror effect the critical faculty has. And even if a person experiences hard times, they will be one of these people who rise up to the occasion, turn things around. Now, if worthlessness is installed, then the critical faculty will form a protective barrier around those feelings of worthlessness. And as an adult, when a person feels worthless, when they feel depressed, when they feel no good, and you try to tell them what a worthy, valuable person they are, I mean, we've all been through that experience. We've all known someone who's felt that way. And what happens? They reject the feelings right away. Their mind just won't accept it. The critical faculty efficiently protects it from that from that perception that doesn't match what was installed first. And this person becomes a magnet for disaster. Even when luck or goodness comes their way, the goodness will find a way to go sour. It will quickly find a way to get tied in a knot. The critical faculty is just as happy when protecting feelings of worth or rejecting anything that's positive. So as we grow, that critical faculty develops in bits and splotches, like puzzle pieces, and it does that behind every new perception that's gained. And around the age 4, developing pieces of the critical thought have a somewhat solid band around all these perceptions. And around the age 12, 13, this individual's heard something on about every topic that exists. They've heard something on every level of whatever. And that's when they know more than everyone else. And that's also the teenage years. The teenage years, for the most part, is when we look at our teenager, and I've got one myself, and I understand this mind model, so it's not like I don't ever think that he's not listening to me. I can tell whenever I say something that doesn't match his perception and it gets blocked, and not for an instant do I blame him or do I get upset and think, why don't you listen to me? It's just like this equivalent of me trying to convince somebody that the grass is blue. It's just a critical faculty at work. And, that's just what happens through the teenage years. And that's just the way the mind works. At this point, the critical faculty around those years forms a complete protective barrier around the subconscious. And we at that moment are willing to defy anything that proves our knowingness. So there's a problem, though. Okay. We are willing to defy anything just to prove what we know. And what we know is true from our standpoint, it's true from our perspective. However, there's a problem. And that knowingness that we have is derived from perceptions that are often out of line with the truth. They're perceptions that we picked up from early environmental things. Where do beliefs come from, right? Beliefs come from, and these all become deep underlying subconscious beliefs that are outside of your awareness, but they are your dominant beliefs that run your life as an adult, that your cells are always eavesdropping on, and they will almost like a thermostat. If you know anything about Maxwell Maltz, psychocybernetics, it's like a thermostat. This program within your early self is like a thermostat, set between, let's say, 65 and 70 degrees in a house. And you open the door, it could be really cold. The heater kicks on and it will resist letting the house get cold because the thermostat doesn't agree with that temperature. Now, on a hot summer day, you open the door, it's 90 degrees out. The thermostat kicks in, it will resist the house getting hot because the thermostat is not set with that temperature. It's just the same way your mind works. So even if you win the lottery, but you have a critical faculty protecting perceptions of I don't deserve X, or I'm no good, or money's hard to come by, money's hard to keep, people that have money are bad, something like that. And again, this is not something you're consciously aware of. There's no way you're aware of these things. But you win the lottery. Let's say you are a person that earns, $75,000 a year. That's the thermostat setting. That's you're in harmony with that income. Chances are it was something similar to what your parents made when you were growing up. May or may not be, but your thermostat is set on that. Your self-image is set on $75,000 a year. You win the lottery, you win $50 million. What happens within about 3 to 5 years? In 90% of those cases, well, the new rise in income, or the new surplus of money, rather, was not in harmony with that thermostat setting of $75,000. And within 3 to 5 years, you'll find a way to sabotage yourself, go completely bankrupt, all without having any idea of why or what happened or where it all went, any of that. But that's how it works. It works with pro athletes. And I mentioned the word income. I should say the same thing happens with incomes. So if you have a certain self image set and I don't deserve X or I don't deserve Y, but let's say you get lucky and get a promotion, that is suddenly, $200,000, you'll find a way to sabotage it before long. You'll find a way to do something out of line with that job, and you will lose that job. As Jim Rohn says, income and personal development are not far off. If your income takes a lucky jump and you don't grow to meet where it is, in other words, you don't work on that thermostat setting, getting mentors and understanding these aspects of yourself and clearing out whatever kind of traumatizing beliefs you acquired to make you feel like $75,000 a year is your set income, um, then sure enough, that income it can jump up. If you don't grow to meet it where it's at, it'll come right back down to where you are. The same thing with health and wellness. That's why you can reverse diabetes type 2 in 200 people, showing them how to eat right, how to exercise, how to, just eat foods that are real foods, stop eating the cereal every morning, start eating bacon and eggs, start fasting sometimes, start walking, even if it's just vigorous exercise like walking. You don't have to do a gym membership. You can do something like walking at a good pace, something that can be enjoyable, right? Um, Most people don't like exercise, but nearly everyone likes walking because it's an enjoyable exercise. It's very healthy for the body, by the way. But after a while, let's say you have 200 people you're reversing diabetes type 2 in, after 6 months to a year, those people will find a way to get back to their diabetic ways. And it's the same exact thing with that thermostat setting. It's the same thing with that self image. Their knowingness, the knowingness they have is derived from perceptions that are out of line with the truth. And this is where people pretty much crash themselves into the rocks, willing to, willing to defy every stated universal law if it conflicts with shortcuts and leniencies. Um, they are, they're going to end up getting right back to where that critical faculty was set at, where those early perceptions resonate with. And this is many times why we find ourselves on the other side of this generation gap, like our parents. Hopefully at some time we learned these early perceptions we were banking on as real truth, and we'd figure out that those things we hold as deep down truth are not truth. That way, we're willing to have an open mind. We're willing to allow ourselves to be flexible enough to change our ideas when new ideas come into place. Um, this this is kind of how we can start to change habits. Yes, habit change is very tough. The critical faculty stops newfound conscious desires for change, compares it to the inner perceptions, and of course, they are not in harmony. So, the more we can recognize this about ourselves, the more we can start to make little changes. The intention of changing a habit guarantees there will be a difference between the new perception that could perhaps improve your life and the old one that is held in that cluster of grapes. Because there's some lack of harmony, because there's a difference, that critical faculty flips on that mirror and rejects the new perception. And of course, this happens even though a person is consciously wanting the change. So when you understand this model, you'll see that logic and will and reason and all these things that we can have in our conscious mind just do not add up. You have to understand that change is going to be difficult. You have to understand that getting past that mirror reflection takes time, and it's not something you're going to beat yourself up about. It's just something that how the mind model works. And you want to go about small changes, and you want to really give yourself lots of credit for any change that you may have accomplished. If you look back, don't look at where you want to be and where you are now, because that can be overwhelming, cause pressure, cause a number of anxious feelings to come up. Where your goal is and where you are now. Don't necessarily look at that. Look at where you once were. Look at where you have been before and the progress you've made to get where you are now. And that can give you some enthusiasm. That can give you some good feelings of that you are beating the odds, that you are improving, that you are healing, that you are, um, improving your self worth, things like that. Those are the things you want to focus on. People will consciously, and oftentimes the problem is people will consciously decide that they have some kind of program running inside of them that they don't like. They'll figure out that there's something running, whether it's something that's in resonant with disease, something that tells them, I'm not good enough, I deserve to be punished, whatever it might be. They will decide that there's something inside of them that they don't like. And usually what happens with the people is they start to study the subject, they start to research, and they want to get really smart on that subject that they don't like. And quickly we find out that knowledge alone does not get change. Having all the knowledge you want, learning all you want about it. That's why the self-help industry is I'm not bashing it whatsoever. I'm just saying that a lot of people are buying things to help themselves and they gain all this knowledge, but yet they're no better off than if they had never read it or studied in the first place. There's a reason for that. For example, let's say a person who smokes cigarettes learns that cigarette smoking is toxic, learns that it's not good for their lungs and it's poison, and there's a lot of chemicals, especially in the paper. That's where most of the chemicals are. But they can gain all this knowledge. They can understand how toxic it is, but they'll still smoke. An overeater, okay, a person who overeats learns the nutritional content of the food, how the stuff they're eating could be chemically, manufactured, technologically manipulated, and how toxic it can be and how inflammatory it is, and how they should arrange themselves into eating a more healthy, balanced diet, lots of healthy meats, vegetables, fruits, lots of colors, things like that. But they still continue to eat the junk. They still are drawn to eat that junk food. Okay. The next thing that usually happens is a person is taught to uh, gather willpower. So let's say if there's a person who smokes cigarettes, how do they get willpower? Somebody urges them, maybe a spouse, maybe somebody tells them, look, you've got to quit this habit. You got to stop right now. And they set a date. Okay, on this, I've got to stop smoking. Well, these things are killing me, they're toxic, all of that. Well, that thought is generated through willpower. And if you remember from our mind model, well, where willpower is located, it's outside of the critical faculty. So willpower is generated outside of the critical faculty in the conscious, weak, lying, rational mind. So even though that thought is generated of I've got to stop smoking, these things are killing me, it's stopped by the critical faculty. The thought to stop smoking that is created in the conscious mind is instantly compared to all the inner perceptions. It's instantly compared to that cluster of grapes that are held on the subject, held on that voice, held on that void. What's the smoking doing? It's doing something for that person. They're not just smoking because they consciously want to. It's attempt to filling some kind of void. All addictions are, by the way. And if you tell somebody to, in my next book, I'm writing about how I have witnessed people that are getting into clinical nutrition where they have autoimmune, where they have chronic conditions, and they work with a nutrition doctor and their condition becomes much worse. Their condition gets much worse despite eating healthier food. My next book will go into that um, in detail. So, the thought of stopping smoking is compared to all the interperceptions held on that subject to a voice that's inside that's saying, hey, all I know is when you take a drag on that cigarette, life gets a little easier, okay? It's a little less stressful. Don't even think about stopping smoking. Just the fact that you're thinking about stopping smoking is making me nervous. In fact, we need one right now. Light one up, right? Smokers will tell you that they want a cigarette worse than ever the very minute they decide they want to quit. The same way a person who overeats, a person that eats too much junk food, to eats too much sugar, will tell you something very, very similar. They say they crave food the worst at the moment they decide to go on a diet. The moment that somebody tells them you can't eat that, something like that, the minute they make a conscious decision to stop eating that junk, stop smoking that cigarette, those ideas that are just thought of are direct threats to the subconscious mind's source of secure feelings. And this is oftentimes why talk therapy seems ridiculous. This is why I say coaches that tell people and nutritionists that tell people that, look, you got to stop eating that crap. You got to stop eating those donuts. Stop drinking that soda. Um, it's a ridiculous idea, but you also you're not honoring their subconscious mind. And the very nature of people is to go from the pan to the fire. You take something like that away, that subconscious calling gets stronger and stronger. And over time, what happens? What happens to them? They're going to go from bad to worse. And that's just the natural progression of how the tendency for addiction type behavior, trying to fill a void, grows. And you can see this all over. Just a real quick example. If you look at, you go into a Walgreens and you look at the pain killing tablets, the pain killing medication, it goes from original strength to extra strength to maximum strength. And that just shows the progressive growth that we have as we start to partake into these things. And if you directly threat the subconscious mind source of secure feelings by telling somebody to take something away without healing that wound, it can be very detrimental over time. So, one of the ways that I deal with this is I don't, if somebody comes to me and they have an addiction, um, I ask them if they're ready to give it up, if they can look at it and say, I hate you, I don't want you in my life anymore. And if they can say that about it, if they can look at those cigarettes, if they can look at that sugar and say, I hate you, I don't want you in my life anymore, and they don't feel like they're giving up a best friend, then we can heal them very quickly. We can get to the point to where they don't want that anymore. If you have them, if they say, well, I don't really hate it, I don't really hate it to where I want to say that. There's no amount of work, whether it's subconscious work or not, no amount of therapy, no amount of change work on earth that will keep them from talking themselves into going back into that into that habit, whatever it might be. So this is why talk therapist is ridiculous, and this is why we have to understand to see real change. To see real change, the person needs to first be able to make that decision. They're ready to let that thing go permanently. They're not feeling like something's getting taken from them. They are ready to surrender it. Okay, very important words. Um, then we can go in and heal that piece that is the void that's what is drawing them to it. And so that's one way that we can get permanent change in people. If you're interested in learning how to start healing some of those voids, some of those wounds, some of those internal perceptions on your own, in a very cost effective way, I highly recommend you get my book, From Pain to Purpose, a complete guide for healing PTSD. It's we'll go through many of the science that I'm talking about right now, the critical faculty, and much more depth, so you understand why habit change is so hard. And this is the piece that's been missing. Yes, people know about the conscious mind, people know about the subconscious mind, but this barrier needs to be respected for change to be, uh, understood. Why change can be difficult, and uh, in this book, you'll start to get some introduction to some of the techniques known as holographic manipulation therapy. That the fact that our memories, our perceptions we hold, those cluster of grapes, are indeed holographic imprints, and you'll start to identify those and be able to access a fragment of them and be able to change the entire holographic construct very quickly. For anyone that buys this book, depending on your level of trauma, you're either going to be able to clear out trauma or at least start to make significant dents in it. And the more you practice, the more you go over these techniques, the more you do the process of what's called bucket listing. There's a whole chapter on how important bucket listing is, will influence how quickly you can start to make dents in these perceptions, make dents in those cluster of grapes that are driving your behavior and oftentimes making you perceive truths that are not aligned with real truths.